March 37 CE. Praetorian guards stood outside sealed chamber doors on Palatine Hill. Inside the imperial palace, Rome's most powerful senators waited in marble corridors. Strange sounds echoed from the private quarters beyond. The ledgers listed musicians, exotic dancers, rare animals transported to the palace, but certain line items remained blank. Empty categories attached to staggering sums. 50,000 sesterces, 100,000. No explanation provided. What happened behind those doors was documented by palace staff, recorded in state financial records, witnessed by those who served the emperor. The evidence survived in their writings. The Palatine Hill rose above Rome's crowded streets. Caligula's palace sprawled across the summit. The Domus Tiberiana formed the main structure. He expanded it immediately upon taking power. His private chambers occupied the palace interior. No windows looked outward. Access required passing pre-guard stations. Only those carrying his personal seal could enter. He built a bridge connecting palace to temple. The structure stretched over the Forum. It linked directly to the temple of Castor and Pollux. Another bridge reached the Capitoline Hill. This one connected to Jupiter's temple. Caligula called them his divine pathways. Underground tunnels ran beneath the complex. The Cryptoorticus allowed unseen movement throughout the palace. Passages connected to various points across Rome. He could travel the city without being seen. The cubiculum served as his bedroom. The Trinium hosted his dinners. A private bathhouse occupied the eastern wing. Guard stations controlled every entrance. 400 slaves and freedmen worked within these walls. They served the emperor's household. Certain rooms required his direct authorization for entry. These chambers existed in the palace's deepest interior. No natural light reached them. March 16, 37 CE. Tiberius died at Misenum. Caligula became emperor at 24 years old. The Senate and Roman people celebrated. For 6 months, he ruled with apparent generosity. The people loved him. October 37 CE brought severe illness. He nearly died. When he recovered, something had changed. Ancient sources mark this as the turning point. Escalating behaviors began in late 37 CE. Each phase grew worse than the last. Specific dates and surviving texts track the progression. His reign lasted exactly 3 years, 10 months, 8 days. January 41 CE ended with his assassination. The timeline matters because everything happened quickly. Senate support turned to conspiracy in under 4 years. The transformation was rapid. The behaviors accelerated constantly. Every month brought new extremes. Tiberius left 2.7 billion sesterces in the state treasury. Suetonius recorded this exact figure. When Caligula died, the treasury stood nearly empty. The money vanished in less than 4 years. Imperial account books tracked where it went. Palace renovations consumed 200 million sesterces. Gladiatorial games and beast hunts strained more. The theatrical performances required constant funding. Personal luxury spending appeared throughout the ledgers. New staff positions emerged in palace records. These roles never existed under previous emperors. Payment records documented their salaries. The positions themselves remained unnamed, just numbered entries with monthly wages attached. Budget categories appeared in 38 CE that had no precedent. One labeled special entertainers received 50 to 100,000 sesterces monthly. Another category listed procurement costs. The items procured went unspecified. The amounts were staggering. Context illuminates the scale. A Roman soldier earned 900 sesterces yearly. The grain dole feeding common citizens cost 50 million annually. Caligula spent multiples of this on palace activities alone. The imperial mint increased production to cover expenditures. Coins flooded the economy. Inflation followed. When minting could not keep pace, he turned to confiscation. Senatorial estates were seized on fabricated charges. The treasury absorbed their wealth. He auctioned palace items to raise emergency funds. The auction sold used goods from imperial quarters. What these items were, sources do not specify. They simply note the sales occurred frequently. The economic drain forced invention of new taxes. He taxed prostitution across the empire. Lawsuits required payment to the state. Food sales and markets carried imperial fees. Every transaction fed palace expenditures. Financial records reveal a clear pattern. Money flowed into the palace constantly. Nothing productive emerged. No public works, no military campaigns, no infrastructure improvements. The expenditures served only private consumption. Later account books compared emperors by spending. Caligula's number stood alone. No predecessor matched his consumption rate. No successor would either until Nero. Treasury officials recorded their concerns in letters. These survive in later collections. They worried about sustainability. They questioned certain expenditure categories. They never received answers. Questions about palace spending stopped when 2 officials disappeared. The remaining accountants simply processed payments. They asked nothing. They recorded everything. The numbers told their own story. Attendance at palace dinners was mandatory for senators. Invitations were commands. Refusal meant political death, sometimes actual death. Senators brought their families as required. This meant wives. This meant children. Document instances record children as young as 8. Some were 12. Sources confirmed these ages repeatedly. Patrician families and equestrian class members filled the lists. Foreign dignitaries visiting Rome received invitations. Provincial governors made the journey. Wealthy citizens seeking favor appeared regularly. The invitation system used wax tablets. Each carried the imperial seal. Tacitus and Suetonius both document the forced attendance. No one declined twice. Diocletian mentioned specific families summoned repeatedly. A pattern emerged in the records. Families with beautiful children received more invitations. The correlation was not subtle. Guard logs tracked who entered and when. Josephus references these logs in his writings. Entry times fell after sunset. Typically, exits occurred before dawn. Sometimes visitors stayed until the next day. Sometimes children remained when parents left. Days passed before their return. Palace slave testimony recorded in later trials confirms this. Regular rotation of young attendees was standard practice. The system operated with bureaucratic efficiency. Lists were maintained. Schedules were followed. Attendance was tracked. Absences were noted. Consequences for absence were immediate. The mechanism of forced participation functioned smoothly. It ran for years. Hundreds passed through. The records documented everything except what happened inside. Palace agents traveled throughout Italy. Their mission was acquisition. They identified candidates meeting specific criteria. The legal mechanism was simple. The emperor could claim any slave from any household. No compensation was required. No appeal existed. Freeborn citizens required different approaches. Financial pressure worked on some families. Fabricated charges worked on others. Suetonius documents a specific case. A senator's son, age 14, was requested for palace service. The father complied immediately. He received political advancement as reward. One instance of refusal is recorded. The family faced exile within a week. The lesson was clear to other families. Compliance brought rewards. Resistance brought ruin. Dio mentions procurement officers with written criteria. Physical appearance standards were detailed. Both male and female acquisitions occurred. Age preferences ran from prepubescent to late teens. Beauty standards matched Greek classical ideals. Foreign acquisitions came from conquered territories. Germanic youth, GIC children, Syrian and Egyptian acquisitions. Market purchases used specific dealers. These merchants knew palace requirements. Premium prices were paid. 10 to 15,000 cess per person. Volume was substantial. Palace records suggest 50 to 100 new acquisitions yearly. Children born to palace slaves became imperial property automatically. Birth records show these children were raised for palace roles. Training began young. The process took 6 months to 2 years. Instruction included Greek language, music and dance, poetry, recitation, serving protocols. Conditioning for obedience involved systematic punishment. Palace hierarchy divided slaves into categories. Domestic slaves performed regular household duties. Personal attendants served different functions. They lived in quarters adjacent to the emperor's chambers. A rotation system determined which attendants served when. Rewards for compliance included better food, private rooms, improved clothing. Punishment for resistance was severe. Documentation exists of beatings, starvation, worse measures unspecified in sources. No attendant could refuse assignment. No attendant could leave palace grounds without authorization. Some never left the complex for years. The procurement system fed this machine. It operated continuously. Fresh acquisitions arrived monthly. The system required constant supply. Speaking about palace activities meant immediate execution. Suetonius documents 3 specific cases. Palace slaves who talked had their tongues removed. This was literal physical removal. One senator died for his facial expression during dinner. His expression apparently showed disapproval. Family-based coercion kept senators quiet. Attendance implicated entire bloodlines. Mutual compromise bound all participants together. Every guest became guilty through witnessing. Legal reality was stark. Contradicting the emperor equaled treason. Treason carried one punishment, death. No legal recourse existed even for free citizens. Children who might testify could be executed. Their parents would die alongside them. This happened multiple times. The precedent was established early. Praetorian Guard loyalty was purchased. Each guard received 1,000 sesterces quarterly. This was far above standard military pay. Guards rotated frequently. This prevented loyalty to anyone except the emperor. Those serving in private quarters received double bonuses. They earned more for their silence. Why guards stayed silent involved both factors. Complicity in what they witnessed. Payment for their cooperation. The combination proved effective. No guard testimony exists from this period. Some elite used philosophical justification. The emperor as living god could do anything. Divine right permitted any action. This reasoning appears in Philo's account. He met Caligula personally. The argument was made directly to him. Roman culture accepted certain practices as normal. Access to slaves was considered a property right. What made Caligula different was scope. He started with slaves. He expanded to freeborn citizens. Eventually, senators' family members became targets. The escalation factor defined his reign. No documentation exists of successful refusal. No one said no and survived. An informant network operated within the palace. Slaves reported on other slaves. Rewards for informants included promises of freedom. These promises were rarely kept. Trust became impossible. Everyone watched everyone else. Survival required silence and compliance. Senatorial dinners occurred 2 to 3 times weekly. The dining room followed specific layout. Caligula reclined on an elevated couch. Guests positioned themselves below. Food quality reached absurd extremes. Single meals cost 100,000 sesterces. Fernium wine flowed without limit. Entertainment progressed through the night in stages. Early evening brought traditional music and poetry. Mighty introduced theatrical performances. The themes followed consistent patterns. Mythological stories involving gods taking mortals. Zeus and Ganymede, Apollo and Hyacinth, Jupiter and Io. The pattern was obvious. Divine power over mortal beauty. Performers were palace slaves. Their clothing decreased as night advanced. Suetonius states explicitly they were unclothed by midnight. Seneca wrote about shows that would shame Nero. He wrote this before Nero even ruled. The comparison suggests extreme content. Interactive elements required senator participation. Drinking contests determined winners. Winners received prizes. These prizes were palace attendants for the night. Losers faced humiliation. They served other guests. They performed degrading tasks. Caligula participated directly according to sources. He selected attendants during dinner. He took them to adjacent rooms. The rooms connected to the dining area. Architecture made them visible. Curtains existed but often remained open. Suetonius records that he took pleasure in being watched. Senators were required to applaud. They showed approval on command. Guards monitored facial expressions carefully. One senator died for looking away. Another was executed for not laughing. The degradation served a purpose. It demonstrated absolute power through forced witnessing. Wives attended these dinners. Specific documented cases exist. Caligula inspected senators' wives during meals. He removed them to private quarters. Hours passed. Husbands remained at the table. Wives returned eventually. Husbands were required to show gratitude. One senator thanked the emperor for honoring his wife. This moment appears in multiple sources. Children were present at some dinners. Old Suetonius and Dio confirm this. Ages ranged down to 10 or 12. Children served as attendants. They performed for guests. Performance requirements escalated as night continued. No permission was asked from parents. Parents were required to watch. They showed approval. Morning brought stumbling exits at dawn. Within days, the next invitation arrived. The cycle repeated constantly, month after month, year after year. The routine never stopped. Caligula's bedroom occupied the palace interior. No windows opened to outside. Complete privacy was ensured. Guards stationed outside the chamber, never inside. Only selected attendants entered. Selection criteria changed based on daily preference. Rotation schedules assigned 3 to 5 attendants per night. Both male and female attendants were documented. Age range remained consistently young. Dio wrote of being surrounded by beautified youth. Suetonius mentioned boys and girls of remarkable beauty. Duration of service meant entire nights in chambers. Morning dismissal returned attendants to slave quarters. Palace physician records were referenced in later sources. Injuries requiring medical treatment occurred commonly. The physicians swore silence under death penalty. Some injuries permanently disabled attendants. Those too damaged were removed from service. Removed meant sold to brothel or disposed of to other means. The bedroom featured mirrors on all walls. Mirrors covered the ceiling as well. Suetonius specifies this detail exactly. Purpose was clear. Caligula wanted to watch from every angle. Erotic artwork from Greece covered remaining wall space. Specific mythological scenes were chosen carefully. All depicted divine power over mortals. The bed itself was massive. Ornate decoration covered every surface. It sat raised on a platform. Philosophical justification came directly from Caligula. He declared himself Jupiter. He claimed he could do as Jupiter does. Claims he could do as Jupiter does. Claims of divinity escalated throughout his reign. He demanded worship as a living god. Divine status justified any action in his reasoning. Temple visits occurred via his private bridge. He claimed conversations with Jupiter himself. These claims appear in Dio, Suetonius, and Philo. All 3 sources mention them. Relations with his sisters were documented by multiple writers. 3 sisters existed: Agrena, Drusilla, Livilla. Drusilla was favored above the others. Public displays were inappropriate for siblings. Suetonius states he lived in habitual relations with all his sisters. Dinner parties featured sisters as more than family. After Drusilla's death, he forced her deification. Anyone not mourning sufficiently faced execution. His grief mixed with claims of divine power. He suggested he could resurrect her. The progression shows clear boundary dissolution. Started with slaves, moved to free persons, then to his own family members. No relationship remained protected. No age was considered sacred. Senators' children appear in specific cases. Suetonius documents these 1 documents. Senator's son was requested for extended palace stay. The boy was 13 years old. His father complied immediately. Political advancement followed. The board return changed. Sources do not specify how. Multiple similar cases are referenced obliquely. The pattern was consistent. Compliance brought rewards. Resistance brought death. The bedroom served as political tool. Access was granted as favor or wielded as punishment. Some families pushed children forward. They sought advantage through compliance. Others tried hiding eligible children. Hiding brought suspicion and danger. The choice was impossible. Compliance or death. Early in his reign, private activities remained private. Late 38 CE marked a shift. Deliberate public display began. Dia documents him walking through Rome in women's clothing, appearing in public dressed as Venus, as Diana, as Apollo, always in costume emphasizing beauty. Public processions featured attendants in minimal clothing. Palace balcony appearances allowed crowds to witness activities. Things normally conducted privately occurred in view. Streets below had clear sightlines. Guards prevented crowds from leaving the area. Forced witnessing became public policy. The floating palace project used ships on Lake Nemi. Construction produced elaborate barges 240 feet long. These were recovered in the 1930s. World War II destroyed them, but documentation survived from before destruction. Ships contained marble floors, heating systems, working plumbing, rotating statues of explicit nature. Surviving descriptions detail their mechanisms. Purpose was clear. Mobile palace for lake parties. Guest lists included senators and families again. Activities on ships mirrored palace events, but isolation increased. Surrounded by water meant no escape. No witnesses from outside. Those aboard were trapped by geography. BIA villa visits followed Tiberius's precedent. Caligula expanded his villa there significantly. Parties lasted multiple days according to sources. Participants were trapped by location. The bridge of boats occurred in 39 CE. He constructed a bridge across the Bay of Bay. Ships formed the span over 2 meters long. He rode across wearing Alexander's breastplate. Purpose remains debated by historians, but sources mention accompanying celebrations. Parties on the bridge lasted 2 days. Attendees included palace favorites and senators. The bridge displayed power, remaking nature itself through will. Theatrical performances for public grew increasingly explicit. Pantomime depicted mythological scenarios. Actors performed scenes Suetonius calls adulterous. Public theater audiences were forced to watch, leaving the theater risked execution. Guards blocked exits. Caligula attended plays and provided commentary. Sometimes he joined performances personally, appearing as Hercules, as Bacchus gods associated with indulgence and excess. The Lupercalia festival brought another incident. This traditional fertility festival was normally symbolic. Caligula made it literal. He ran through streets as the god required, completely unclothed. Palace attendants ran with him. The public was required to participate or watch. Religious festival became personal display. Magistrates were forced to approve and participate. Religious justification covered any behavior. Marriage to Sionia occurred after she bore his daughter. Julia de Sionia was born in 39 CE. He claimed the child's beauty proved divine parentage. He boasted about his infant daughter inappropriately. He stated he would know if she was truly his when she was old enough to test. This statement was preserved in Suetonius. Multiple sources confirm the same disturbing comment. Marriage to Livia Aristilla happened during her wedding to someone else. He attended another man's wedding feast. He claimed the bride mid-ceremony, married her immediately, divorced her within days. Lolia Paulina received similar treatment. Marriage to Melonia Seosia lasted because she bore him a child. The pattern was consistent. Take what he wanted, discard when bored. No institution remained safe from his desires. No custom was respected. Everything became performance of absolute power. Witnesses were required to approve to participate. Rome itself transformed into his private chamber. The boundary between public and private was eliminated deliberately, systematically, completely. Palace attendant turnover rate was suspiciously high. Comparison to Tiberius reveals the difference. Under the previous emperor, slaves served for decades. Under Caligula, few lasted more than a year. No retirement system existed for used attendants. Where they went appears in fragments across sources. Some were sold to mainland brothel. The price collapse was dramatic. A palace attendant worth 15,000 sesterces sold for 1,200. Physical condition explained the price drop. Brothel owners testified later about palace refugees. They described conditions these former tenants arrived in. Many could not work even in brothel too damaged. Gladiatorial schools received some male attendants, not as fighters, as arena victims for beast hunts. Criminals and slaves served as live prey. Palace attendants were categorized as used property. Arena deaths meant disposal without questions. The Tiber River received bodies regularly during his reign. Historical patterns show bodies in the Tiber increased 40 to 41 CE. Sources do not specify identity, but timing is notable. Weighty bodies washed up despite precautions. No investigations occurred. The emperor sat above law. Palace physicians. Ethical crisis appears in later sources. He was required to treat injuries knowing he enabled more abuse. He could not refuse treatment. One physician was executed for suggesting the emperor seek help. Medical supply consumption spiked under Caligula. Bandages, ointments, pain remedies ordered in massive quantities. Supply records were preserved in later imperial accounts. These compared different emperors. Those who aged out faced no pension, no freedom. Previous emperors granted freedom to long-serving slaves. Caligula granted freedom to 0 palace attendants. All were sold, eliminated, or disappeared. Former attendants who could speak chose not to. Trauma and fear kept survivors silent. Those who did speak faced immediate execution. Conservative estimates rely on source references. Palace attendant positions numbered approximately 50 to 80. In personal service specifically, yearly turnover calculated at 1-year average service, 50 to 80 yearly replacements needed. Reign duration was 3 years, 10 months. Approximate total cycle 2 was 2 to 300 minimum. This excludes one-time visitors. Short-term acquisitions are not counted. Senatorial family members prove harder to count. Visiting children do not appear in death records. Families hid deaths too. Avoid palace association reported as illness as accident. Anything but palace connection. Infant mortality in senatorial families increased during this period. Later historians noted the statistical anomaly. Children ages 8 to 16 showed double death rates, 38 to 41 CE versus the previous decade. Correlation is not proven, but timing is significant. Dio mentions many families lost children to palace summons. He remains intentionally vague, even he feared being explicit. Execution records form a separate category from disappearances. Those executed for refusing number at least 30 documented cases. This includes parents who tried hiding children, includes palace staff who refused assignments, includes witnesses who spoke afterwards. Total death toll directly attributable ranges from 3 to 500. This includes attendants, visitors, executed refusers, witnesses eliminated. Indirect deaths from families' ruin cannot be counted. Suicides from economic ruin were common. Sources mention countless families destroyed. No comprehensive accounting was ever done. Would require the emperor to document his own activities. Later emperors had no interest in full investigation. After the assassination on January 24, 41 CE, a brief window opened. Conspirators hoped to expose everything. Claudius became emperor the same day. His priority was different. Stability mattered more than justice. Exposing the full scope risked delegitimizing imperial authority itself. If an emperor could do this, what did that mean? Senate debate addressed whether to investigate fully. The decision was selective investigation only. Financial crimes were investigated. Safe topic. Personal activities were quietly buried. Why becomes clear examining senatorial involvement. Too many senators were implicated through attendance. Their children suffered. Their silence enabled it. Their participation made them guilty. Full investigation meant exposing their compliance. Mutual assured. Destruction principle applied. Everyone guilty of something meant no one punished for anything. Palace staff trials began but did not finish. Several administrators were charged with enabling activities. Trials were delayed again, eventually dropped. Witnesses began dying mysteriously. Former attendants who agreed to testify disappeared before trial. The pattern suggested organized suppression. Claudius's role remains unclear. Whether he ordered it or simply allowed it, the effect was the same. Truth never fully emerged in court. Written records were systematically destroyed. Palace account books had many pages removed. Financial records showed expense categories erased. Guard logs were burned entirely. Claudius claimed necessity. Moving forward, not backward. Historical writing came much later. Suetonius wrote 80 years after the events. By then, only fragments remained. He relied on earlier sources now lost. Dio wrote over 150 years later, even more removed from events. Both admit information is incomplete. Both cite sources they cannot verify. The suppression worked. Full truth died with witnesses. What survived was enough to condemn Caligula. Vague enough to protect everyone else. Designed ambiguity served multiple purposes. Later emperors protected predecessor activities. Precedent was dangerous. Today's investigator becomes tomorrow's investigated. January 41 CE brought conspiracy among Taurian guard officers. Primary conspirator was Cassius Chaerea. He served as Taurian tribune. His motivation combined personal humiliation and witnessed horrors. Caligula mocked his voice constantly, gave him obscene passwords, publicly degraded him. But Chaerea also witnessed palace activities through guard duty. Other conspirators included Cornelius Sabinus, another tribune. Palace officials joined them. Senator involvement remains debated by historians. Senators benefited from the outcome, but evidence of direct participation is thin. Timing occurred during Palatine Games. January 24, 41 C location was the underground corridor. The cryptoporticus beneath the palace. Caligula was leading a theater performance via tunnel. Small guard escort accompanied him. Conspirators had intentionally reduced the number. Chaerea struck first, sword to shoulder. Other conspirators joined immediately. Over 30 stab wounds total. Death came nearly instantly from multiple wounds. Immediate aftermath brought chaos to the palace. His dramatic bodyguards went on rampage. They killed several senators indiscriminately, seeking revenge for their emperor. Praetorian Guard restored order eventually. Senate briefly debated restoring the Republic. Debate lasted mere hours before reality set in. Claudius was found hiding behind a curtain. Praetorians declared him emperor. Same day, new emperor. Same day, new emperor. System continued unchanged. Claudius's first act emptied Caligula's private quarters. All attendants were removed within 24 hours. Where they went has no records. Logical conclusions suggest elimination as witnesses. No former palace attendant appears in any later record. Complete disappearance of everyone who served privately. Palace staff reorganization was total. Entire household replaced. Even regular domestic slaves were removed. Claudius brought his own staff entirely. The purge was thorough. Anyone who might testify was gone. Furniture was removed from private chambers. Mirrors torn from bedroom walls. Erotic artwork was destroyed or stored away. Physical evidence of activities was eliminated systematically. Lake Nemi ships were abandoned. The floating palaces scuttled deliberately. Preservation would preserve what they represented. All material evidence was destroyed within weeks. The palace was cleansed. The witnesses were silenced. The evidence was burned. The chapter was closed. Palatine Hill still holds the palace location today. Domus Tiberiana ruins remain visible to visitors. No plaques mention Caligula's private chambers. No markers. Explain what happened in those rooms. Tourism focuses on architecture, not on activities. The tunnels still exist beneath modern Rome. The Cryptorchicus where he died is preserved, but unexplained to tourists. Visitors walk through without knowing what happened above. Historical consensus among scholars is clear. Sources agree on basic facts. Disagreement exists only on specific details on extensive activities. Suetonius, Philo, Seneca all confirm core events. Modern historians debate interpretations, not whether events occurred.